Number 5. Apollo 11 engines. It was 2013 when Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos announced that he would have a team explore the Atlantic Ocean for 2 F-1 rocket engines that were part of the Apollo 11 mission that sent US astronauts to the moon for the first time in 1969. The crew Bezos put together found the 2 F-1 rockets some 14,000 feet below the ocean off the coast of Florida. According to CNN, the Saturn V rocket that transported Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins during the Apollo 11 mission to the moon was propelled by F-1 engines. Approximately 38 miles above the Earth, the initial stage of the spacecraft, including the engines, detached, and these components were deemed irretrievably lost. Each engine weighed 18,500 pounds, and they provided 32 million horsepower by burning 6,000 pounds of fuel every second. Bezos wrote the following for his blog in 2013. 44 years ago tomorrow, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. And now we have recovered a critical technological marvel that made it all possible. Number 4. The Vasa. The Vasa was built during the 17th century and was supposed to be the greatest ship ever built for the Swedish Navy. But it turned out to be an infamous ship that failed to live up to expectations. The story of the Vasa sounds unbelievable, but it's absolutely true. King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden ordered the construction of the ship around 1624. During his reign, Sweden was involved in 3 wars. They were fighting Russia, Denmark, and Poland-Lithuania. King Gustavus wanted Sweden to be a major power, so he ordered 4 ships to be built, and one of them was the Vasa. The Vasa was designed to be the most powerful warship on the planet. Gustavus Adolphus was a king who was thinking outside of the box when developing the Vasa. The king understood the importance of artillery, and at the time, the main strategy was to board an enemy ship and capture it. Gustavus knew battles on the seas would be artillery duels, so he wanted his fleet to be armed with the biggest and best guns available. The Vasa construction project was in trouble in 1626 when master shipbuilder Henrik Hybertson walked away from the project due to illness. And just a year later, he was dead. But construction continued, and the ship was launched in 1627. In the end, the Vasa was a 226-foot ship that was supposed to be the most feared ship on the seas. It was also beautifully decorated, with wooden carvings on the ship depicting stories about the Swedish royal family, especially King Gustavus Adolphus. The Vasa had an astounding 64 cannons on her maiden voyage, and was scheduled for August 10, 1628. The ship was tested before its maiden voyage, but things didn't go as planned. An admiral was called to the ship by one of the men in charge of the construction to witness the test, and during the test, 30 men were to run back and forth on the deck of the Vasa. But when they did this, the ship rolled. So the admiral ordered the men to stop running because he feared it would sink. Despite the problems though, the Vasa was ordered to set sail in August 1628, and it would be a voyage few would forget. The maiden voyage of the Vasa was brief. The ship sailed less than a mile before tragedy struck. High winds had caused the ship to tilt to the port side or left side, and water rushed into the open gun ports of the vessel. And this resulted in the Vasa sinking. But what exactly went wrong? In all honesty, the project was doomed from the beginning because there was more of an emphasis on firepower and design than seaworthiness. The 64 cannons were just too much for the ship, and the weight couldn't be properly supported while on the seas. Gustavus Adolphus was furious about the sinking. An inquiry was made, and the surviving officers and crew were questioned, as well as the shipbuilders. In the end, no one was found guilty. However, some put the blame on the master shipbuilder, Henrik Hybertson. Over the years, salvaging attempts were made but failed. In 1961, though, the Vasa was brought up for the whole world to see, and just 1 year later, the public had the chance to see the Vasa in person. The vessel is on exhibit today at the museum dedicated to the famed ship in Sweden. At number 3, the Antitherero Mechanism. The Antitherero Mechanism was developed by ancient Greeks to calculate information related to astronomical phenomena. In 1901, the Antitherero Mechanism was raised from the wreckage of a ship that had sunk in the Mediterranean Sea sometime in the 1st century BC. A diver who had discovered the wreckage thought they also found dead bodies, but they were nothing more than marble structures. The mechanism itself is the size of a shoebox, and it might have been built sometime around 100 BC. Also, what was salvaged eventually broke apart while being inspected by museum officials in Athens, Greece, and the mechanism eventually fragmented into 82 pieces. What makes this discovery incredibly fascinating is the estimated 30 gears in the mechanism. Those gears are responsible for making the Antitherero mechanism one of the most complex instruments in the ancient world. This amazing device allowed the ancient Greeks to regulate calendars and had even provided them with information regarding lunar or solar eclipses. The Antitherero mechanism has been X-rayed and has been scanned by computerized tomography or CTs, which has allowed researchers to know more about the device. These tests has even allowed some to develop their own models of the mysterious Antitherero mechanism. Number 2. Air France Flight 447. Air France Flight 447 was scheduled to fly from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil to Paris, France on May 31, 2009. It was supposed to be a normal 11-hour flight. The plane was an Airbus A330-200, and there were over 200 people on board. 3 hours into the flight, the crew made a standard radio call to the Brazilian air traffic control. The pilot did little more than provide their position, and that was their last communication with Brazil. Around 1:35 a.m., air traffic control in Brazil radioed that they would hand over air traffic control to Senegal in Africa. Flight 447 didn't respond though, which wasn't all that suspicious at first. It was 2:05 a.m. when the plane went through a storm and things took a turn for the worse. The captain of the plane was on a sleep break and 2 co-pilots were flying the plane. The speed indicator stopped working along with the autopilot, so the co-pilots had to fly the plane manually. A less experienced co-pilot was flying the Air France plane when it stalled. Warnings for the plane stalling out rang over 4 minutes. The co-pilots didn't seem concerned about the warning sounds, but their actions in the plane were incredibly odd. The plane was climbing but stalling, which shouldn't have happened in that situation. Having the nose up during a stall meant that the plane was losing altitude. It seemed like the co-pilots weren't communicating with each other, putting their lives and the lives of those passengers in peril. By 2:10 a.m., the plane lost significant altitude and the captain returned to the cockpit from break. That's when he realized that the situation was incredibly bad and that his co-pilots were 10,000 feet above the ocean and were preparing to crash land the aircraft. The captain tried to save the plane, but Air France Flight 447 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. There were 228 people on board at the time, and there were no survivors. Meanwhile, in France, air traffic control was surprised to learn that Air France Flight 447 was nowhere to be found. French officials declared a state of emergency, and it would take 5 days for searchers to find any signs of Flight 447 in the Atlantic. Pieces of the wreckage were eventually discovered in the Atlantic Ocean, along with 50 of the bodies of those who perished. Those who were critical of the crew said that they didn't have enough experience flying the plane manually. They relied too much on the autopilot system and didn't understand what they were doing. One person told CBS News that things had to change for pilots in these situations because maintaining and improving the knowledge and skills for manual flight operations is necessary for safe flight operations. It was 2011 when rescue teams began the difficult task of recovering victims from the flight, who were still underwater. There was a debris field about 2.4 miles below the surface. The most difficult aspect of retrieving the dead from the ocean was that the corpses were in an extremely fragile state, so rescuers had to be very careful in their work. Another issue was the work itself. Apparently, some of the family members wanted the victims to be left at the crash site in the ocean. During these rescue operations, they made an incredibly important discovery. The black boxes from the aircraft were found. Black boxes provide valuable information regarding the flight and would allow investigators the opportunity to understand the final moments of the flight. According to ABC News, the discovery of the black box revealed that Flight 447, which departed from Brazil en route to Paris, encountered heavy icing at 35,000 feet, nearly 4 hours into the flight. This icing led to the malfunction of the speed sensors, causing the onboard computers to receive inaccurate and perplexing speed readings. This wasn't the end of the story, though. Families of the victims sued Air France for a variety of issues linked to the crash of Flight 447. There was a claim that Air France knew about the faulty sensors on some of their aircraft, like the one that crashed. Another claim was that the co-pilots weren't properly trained. Airbus, the plane's manufacturer, and Air France were charged with involuntary manslaughter, but in the end, they were acquitted due to a lack of evidence. And at number 1, the Gate Titanic submersible. It was Sunday, June 18, 2023, when a 21-foot deep-sea vessel named Titan, owned and operated by OceanGate Expeditions, disappeared in the Atlantic Ocean near Newfoundland, Canada. The Titan had 5 people on board, and they were traveling on the deep-sea vessel to view the wreckage of the Titanic. Their voyage occurred at around 8 a.m. that morning. Those on board the Titan were Stockton Rush, Shahzada Dawood, his son Suleiman Dawood, Hamish Harding, and Pearl-Henri Narjolet. Narjolet was the director of underwater research at RMS Titanic Inc. Rush was the CEO of OceanGate and the owner of the Titan vessel. Harding was a British businessman who was no stranger to challenging expeditions. The Dawoods were a British father and son duo. Shahzada was the vice chairman of Engro Corporation Limited, and Suleiman was his son who was attending college. The Titan lost contact with the main base about 1 hour and 45 minutes into the voyage. The submersible had an oxygen supply that would last 96 hours in case of an emergency. But when the main base couldn't get in touch with the Titan, OceanGate Expeditions contacted the United States Coast Guard about an overdue vessel. It was Monday, June 19th, when the United States Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard, and the Canadian military joined forces to search for the Titan. Aerial surveillance of the Atlantic was conducted, and the area they searched was roughly the size of the state of Connecticut, around 5,500 square miles. It wasn't until June 21st when the Canadians had picked up underwater noises in the search area. Ships were steered to that area so remotely operated vehicle operations could be conducted to find the missing Titan and the people on board. And at that point, time was ticking for those on the submersible because their air supply was about to run out. Canada deployed an ROV called the Horizon Arctic, and it made its way to the seafloor on June 22nd. Another ROV was deployed by a French vessel that had joined in on the search. Before noon that same day, the United States Coast Guard tweeted that a debris field was discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. Someone from the United States Coast Guard informed the press that the debris showed something that was consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Unfortunately, the fears of searchers and the families were becoming reality. Something terrible had happened, and it was up to the searchers to figure out the series of events that led to the disaster. As the search for information continued, searchers noticed that the debris field looked like the result of a major implosion. According to an ABC News report, a former OceanGate employee claimed in a 2018 counterclaim lawsuit that he was dismissed for expressing concerns about the quality control and testing processes related to potential flaws in the experimental submersible, which later suffered an implosion. 6 days after the announcement of the fate of the Titan, it was reported that debris had been brought up from the ocean along with what were believed to be human remains. ABC News reported that salvaged pieces of the Titan vessel were unloaded from the Horizon Arctic in St. John's, Newfoundland, at the Canadian Coast Guard Pier. The debris was to be reviewed by groups including the National Transportation Safety Board. At the time, someone who'd worked for the NTSB told the press that the investigation would take some time because it was uncharted territory for them to review the wreckage of something like the Titan. The individual also informed the media that this incident resulted in the first fatality on a passenger-carrying submarine and was certainly the first one occurring at this depth during a descent to the Titanic. Number 10. P51 Mustang found. A P51 Mustang was found in a United States military base in Japan in 1946 when officers were touring a hangar. The hangar was full of Japanese aircraft that were once used for training purposes and among the planes was a P51 Mustang. The Mustang had crashed at some point into a bay near the base in 1945. The pilot didn't survive the crash, but the wreckage was salvaged. Number 9. British planes in Ukraine. During World War II, the British sent 3,000 aircraft to the Soviet Union. They'd been invaded by Germany and were in need of military equipment and supplies. It was 1941 when the British began sending these much-needed supplies to the Soviet Union. This would be part of the Lend-Lease programs of the time, where the US and Britain would send food, fuel, and weapons to the Soviets. One of the planes Britain sent over was the P-47 Hawker Hurricane. This plane was viewed as a reliable workhorse for the British military, and they were developed in the 1930s. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, during the Battle of France, which took place between May and June of 1940, Hurricanes primarily engaged in air-to-air combat and outnumbered Spitfire squadrons with 30 squadrons to 19 at the outset of the Battle of Britain. A 2023 article from The Guardian in the UK reported that the remains of some Hurricane fighters were found buried near a forest in Kyiv, Ukraine. Someone who is part of the project told The Guardian, "It is very rare to find this aircraft in Ukraine. It is very important for our aviation history because no Lend-Lease aircraft has been found here before." The planes that were unearthed had been stripped of equipment. A theory behind these planes being buried is that the Soviets didn't want to pay the US or Britain for the planes they leased during the war. Number 8. The Greenland planes. It was 1983 when two pilots from the United States wanted to travel to Greenland to dig up P-38 fighters and some B-17 bombers that were abandoned there during World War II. The two pilots had received funding from the Reynolds Tobacco Company to put together a team of 15 people to search for the planes. At the time, it was believed that some of the aircraft were buried under snow. They were most excited to find the P-38, which was specifically a P-38J. These planes were special to the team because it was the first twin-engine plane to cross the Atlantic. The P-38J, according to the team, was the first US plane to shoot down a German aircraft during the Second World War. So how did these planes end up in Greenland? They were flying from Maine to Europe when they encountered terrible weather conditions and were forced to crash land around July 25, 1942. The crews were eventually rescued, but the planes were left behind. The project reportedly took some 12 years and $1.5 million to complete. But why did it take so long? Well, it's because the planes were buried under 270 feet of ice. After being dug out, the P-38 was sent to the United States and went on exhibit at the DeKalb Peachtree Airport in the 1990s. Number 7. The Pot Plane. The Louisville Courier-Journal reported in 1976 that two men in Tennessee were arrested for hiding $800,000 worth of narcotics in a World War II airplane that was reported to be abandoned. A man from California and another man from Kentucky loaded 2 tons of pot onto a twin-engine Lockheed Lodestar and made a flight to an airport in Cumberland County, Tennessee. The plane was discovered by authorities and the craft had information about one of the men. The two were reportedly caught hitchhiking in Tennessee and were arrested. But unfortunately, that's all the information we have available about this story. Number 6. Plata Plane Sanctuary. It was reported that a prototype North American XP-82 twin Mustang was found in Newberry, Ohio. This is a community that's situated east of Cleveland and is home to the Soplata Airplane Sanctuary. It was founded by Walter Soplata, a Czech immigrant. In the late 1940s, Soplata worked in a junkyard and discovered that it contained various military aircraft. So he decided to bring the aircraft to his own property. Soplata traveled around the US to save planes from being scrapped. At times, Soplata would pay more than what the plane was worth being scrapped in order to save the vehicle. He would cut the plane so he could haul them on the highway. And today, his aircraft collection features some abandoned World War II planes, like a Douglas AD Skyraider and an early jet-age Chance Vought F-7U Cutlass. Number 5. The Pacific Lagoon Planes. Project Recover is a cooperative initiative that harnesses the power of modern science and technology to search for and bring home Americans who went missing in action during World War II. The aim of offering closure and recognition to their families and the nation. There are an estimated 80,000 missing U.S. servicemen who've been listed as missing for conflicts dating back to World War II. Project Recover's mission includes searching for lost aircraft. Because the remains of the missing are believed to be with the wreckage, some of the aircraft are considered abandoned due to various circumstances. One of their missions involved aiding in the discovery of 2 SBD-5 Dauntless dive bombers and 1 TBM-F-1 Avenger. These 3 planes were found in Truk Lagoon in the Chuuk state of Micronesia. Project Recover was joined on the mission by Bent Prop Project, a private organization of divers, aviators, and historians. Their goal is to find World War II service members missing in action in the South Pacific. The 3 missing planes went down during 1944's Operation Hailstone. This was one of the many important missions by the US military to weaken the Japanese presence in the Pacific Ocean. Operation Hailstone was a 2-day battle that saw more than 50 Japanese ships destroyed and 230 aircraft obliterated. Out of the 230 aircraft that were lost, 30 were American, including the 2 SBD-5 Dauntless dive bombers and the TBM-F-1 Avenger. Some 23 American pilots were lost during Operation Hailstone. The planes were missing for 76 years. The steps to finding the aircraft included researching official reports, reading the memoirs of those who were part of Operation Hailstone, and speaking with the residents of the Chuuk state of Micronesia to see what they knew about the planes in the Truk Lagoon. A memoir of one soldier recalled the last location of one of the 2 SBD-5 Dauntless dive bombers, and this gave them an area to begin their search. The search team spent over a year investigating some 27 square miles. Many aircraft broke into fragments, so divers were sent down with high-definition cameras. Once they were able to identify pieces of the 3 planes, they turned everything over to the US Department of Defense's POW MIA accounting agency. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the video so far, please like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get back into it. Number 4. Lake Mead, Nevada, Arizona. It was July 1948 when a B-29 crashed into Lake Mead, a body of water that goes from Nevada into Arizona. And sadly, 5 crew members were on board when the plane crashed. A report claimed that the B-29 crashed due to the instruments on the plane being improperly calibrated, but gossip around town said the plane crashed because the pilot was hot-dogging or flying the plane too low as a stunt. Whatever the cause was, the plane hit the water of Lake Mead and then flew another 200 to 300 feet before coming to a rest in the water. 4 of the 5 were able to escape, but 1 was stuck inside the plane. So a couple of crew members went into the water to save the 5th. They were all fine and got into a raft to await help. And eventually they were rescued and returned to base. The B-29 rolled off the assembly line days after Japan surrendered. It was never in combat, but was equipped to be a plane that could research cosmic rays. The plane was at the bottom of Lake Mead until it was discovered by a local diver in 2001. It's still at the bottom of Lake Mead to this day. A Nevada newspaper provided a status on the B-29 in 2021. The aircraft is presently included in the National Register of Historic Places, and the Park Service is actively working towards bestowing it upon the prestigious designation of a National Historic Landmark. This elevated status signifies the recognition of the American people that these places or objects hold significant historical importance. Number 3. Gander Lake, Newfoundland. A B-24 Liberator bomber was discovered in Gander Lake, Newfoundland in 2022. The B-24 with a crew of 4 crashed in 1943, and sadly, everyone on board was killed. The plane had been in the lake for 79 years before it was finally found. A diver with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society said at a depth of approximately 120 feet, they observed the landing gear, which appeared to have fully inflated tires and a somewhat crumpled appearance. However, aside from that, the underwater findings were remarkably well preserved and in incredible condition. The dive wasn't easy because of the color of Gander Lake, which has been described as a tea red. That color absorbs light, which makes any dive a night dive. Rescue efforts were attempted following the wreck, but the crews were apprehensive to recover the wreckage when it was discovered in a deep part of the lake. A rescue team, including people from groups like the Shipwreck Preservation Society of Newfoundland and Labrador, attempted to locate and rescue the plane. They haven't been able to bring it back up to the surface yet, but they have managed to take some images of the wreck. And there are currently plans in place to sell the images to local museums as well as the SPSNL. Number 2. Lake Greenwood, South Carolina. A World War II-era B-25 training airplane that was discovered in Lake Greenwood in South Carolina has been on exhibit for the community. Discovered in 1983, the B-25 was restored by the South Carolina Historic Aviation Foundation. And now visitors have a chance to view the plane in person. What we know about the crash of the B-25 is that it was flying too low near Lake Greenwood on June 6, 1944, which also happened to be D-Day. While the plane has been restored, it's by no means flyable. However, there are plans to use it as a centerpiece at a proposed South Carolina museum. And at number 1, losts in the Great Lakes. During World War II, some 200 to 300 aircraft were lost in the Great Lakes, and the majority of those aircraft were lost in Lake Michigan. But why? Lake Michigan was the place where Navy pilots attempted to qualify for carrier takeoffs and landings. It was also a safer location for pilots to train than the Atlantic or Pacific. There were possible threats of enemy attacks, especially submarines, so it was important to protect pilots who were still training and weren't quite combat ready. The Navy even took some older ships and converted them to look like aircraft carriers. There were 2 boats, the USS Wolverine and the USS Sable, which were both kept in the Great Lakes for training needs. Both ships were also decommissioned after World War II. When interviewed by a local radio station in 2021, Ben Page, a museum curator in Wisconsin, said, "There was a tremendous amount of training going on during the Second World War right in Lake Michigan. Roughly 15,000 pilots trained on Lake Michigan alone. And of the 200 to 300 planes that crashed in Lake Michigan, roughly 50 have been rescued, including a Grumman F-4F-3 Wildcat fighter that's currently on exhibit in the EAA Museum in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Some of the planes that crashed were salvaged during the war, while other planes were rescued decades later. The crashes have been attributed to miscalculations by pilots and aircraft mechanical failures. Also, not all of the training action was over Lake Michigan. Another training location was Lake Huron. Lake Huron is the burial spot for several lost Army aircraft. And although it's not a Great Lake, there were Army planes that were also lost in Lake St. Clair, which is south of Lake Huron near Detroit, Michigan and Windsor, Ontario. The Tuskegee Airmen also did test flights over Lake Huron. The Tuskegee Airmen were the first African-American pilots to serve the United States during World War II. They trained in Alabama at the segregated Tuskegee Army Airfield. Then they went to Michigan to complete more training missions over Lake Huron. These were advanced training missions, and the location in Michigan was perfect because it mirrored the conditions the pilots would face in Europe. Following the completion of the training missions in Michigan, some of the pilots were sent to North Africa and Europe. The rest were transferred to an airbase in South Carolina. One of the locations used in Michigan by the Tuskegee Airmen would be used by French pilots afterward when they were brought to the United States for training. 2 aircraft were lost between 1943 and 1944, but later they were found. They were crashes that occurred during training missions. Both pilots, Lieutenant Frank Moody and Lieutenant Nathaniel Rayberg, were killed during these crashes. Their planes were both Bell P-39Q Air Cobras. Moody's crash was believed to be due to the failure of his machine guns not being properly synced with his propellers. It's been suggested that Moody tried firing his guns, but they damaged the propellers and he crashed. Some of the French pilots who trained at the Great Lakes were also involved in crashes. 5 Republic P-47D Thunderbolts crashed into Lake Huron. One of them was flown by Sergeant François Messinger, but unfortunately he was killed in the accident near Sturgeon Point at Lake Huron. Since the 1980s, there have been multiple attempts by people to locate the missing Michigan planes. Taras Lysenko is one of those people, and his company has assisted in the recovery of 40 aircraft from Lake Michigan. One of those planes, an SBD Dauntless dive bomber, is on exhibit at the Air Zoo near Kalamazoo, Michigan. The Navy has thoroughly researched the aircraft lost in Lake Michigan, and according to them, the collection of aircraft in Lake Michigan stands as the most extensive and exceptionally preserved array of historic U.S. Navy sunken aircraft on a global scale. In historical terms, this assemblage offers a treasure trove of insights into the history of naval aviation. The cool waters of Lake Michigan have allowed the planes to be preserved nicely, and when recovered, some of them were found in surprisingly good shape.
7. Coral Reef Squadron. The Coral Reef Squadron, an initiative to build an artificial reef off the coast of Phuket, promised to be an incredible addition to Thailand's marine ecosystems. The project aimed to sink 10 decommissioned aircraft, including 4 Douglas C-47 Dakota Skytrain military transport planes and 6 Sikorsky S-58T helicopters from the Royal Thai Air Force. These aircraft were placed to be used as a new habitat for marine life, offering a unique underwater experience for divers and tourists. Sadly, the project faced several challenges from the beginning. Poor weather thwarted the planned sinking, forcing the need to store the aircraft at Lion Beach until November 2008. Despite the many obstacles, the Coral Reef Squadron was set to become Thailand's largest artificial reef. The key feature of the project was the large C-47 aircraft. They were secured to the seabed using massive concrete blocks. The intention was to build an environment where marine life could flourish, ultimately transforming the sunken aircraft into vibrant, thriving ecosystems. Fortunately, the Coral Reef Squadron faced another unexpected setback. Monsoon season currents ravaged the planes, leading to their rapid deterioration. Also, a combination of factors, including failure to follow instructions during the installation process, contributed to the rapid decline of the artificial reef. The Thai Dive Association, TDA, later conducted an assessment of the site and found that 90% of the aircraft were either missing or completely destroyed. This was a significant blow to the project's reputation and a disappointment for the agencies that invested time, effort, and money into making it a success. But the project's failure served as a warning tale for future endeavors. The TDA acknowledged its mistakes and contemplated alternative strategies for building artificial reefs in the future. While the Coral Reef Squadron met an unfortunate end thanks to the forces of nature and human error, the idea of repurposing decommissioned aircraft as artificial reefs remains an interesting concept for marine conservation and tourism. 6. The Caspian Sea Monster. The revival of the Caspian Sea Monster, a massive and strange flying machine called an ekranoplan, has attracted considerable attention. This iconic Soviet-era creation, which was abandoned for over 3 decades, was given a new lease of life when it began its final journey in July 2020, resting on the western shores of the Caspian Sea. Moving this colossal 380-ton Lung-class ekranoplan to a new home near the city of Derbent in Russia's Dagestan Republic was a difficult 14-hour process that involved a flotilla of tugs and escort vessels. Ekranoplans, or ground effect vehicles, are hybrid machines that combine characteristics of both airplanes and ships. They glide over the water's surface without making contact, utilizing the aerodynamic principle referred to as the ground effect. This design feature allows them to achieve high speeds while flying just 1 to 5 meters above the water, making them hidden from radar detection, a quality that caught the attention of the Soviet military during the Cold War. The ekranoplan program had a variety of experimental models, earning the nickname Caspian Sea Monster thanks to their deployment in the body of water between the Soviet Union and Iran. The Lung-class ekranoplan, unlike its counterparts that were never finished, was a formidable machine capable of speeds of up to 550 kilometers per hour thanks to 8 powerful turbofans attached to its stubby wings. It was designed for seaborne attacks, holding 6 anti-ship missiles in launch tubes atop its hull. This unique vehicle is a testament to Soviet engineering and innovation. Today, the ekranoplan stands as the star attraction of Durban's Patriot Park, a military museum and theme park that features various Soviet and Russian military equipment. The construction of the park, although somewhat delayed, is expected to offer an official platform for visitors to explore the giant relic. But even before its formal opening, the ekranoplan has become a major tourist magnet, captivating the imagination of Russian tourists who've been drawn to Dagestan thanks to travel restrictions caused by the pandemic. The Caspian Sea Monster resurgence also coincides with ongoing projects aimed at rekindling the ekranoplan concept, with companies like the Flying Ship Company and Singapore-based Widget Works who are exploring new avenues for ground effect vehicles. As history meets innovation, the Akranaplan continues to capture the imagination of those interested in its remarkable capabilities and the legacy it carries from the Cold War. 5. Keybird, Greenland. In the icy wastes of northwestern Greenland, the burnt remains of a B-29 Super Fortress bomber can be found. On February 20, 1947, a routine top-secret mission involving U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Vern H. Arnott and his 11-man crew departed, leaving on a journey that had ultimately become one of the strangest episodes in aviation history. Their B-29 Keybird Super Fortress, belonging to the 46th Reconnaissance Squadron, was circumnavigating the geographic North Pole and set to return to land field. They were equipped with enough fuel to last for 26 hours of flight if conditions stayed at normal levels, anticipating a mission duration of 12 to 20 hours, landing at 10 a.m. Alaska Standard Time. The mission, though, took an unexpected turn when the aircraft had to make an emergency landing on a frozen lake in the northwestern side of Greenland on February 21, 1947. The Keybird's mission was part of the 46th Reconnaissance Squadron's activities based at Ladd Field near Fairbanks, Alaska. Their responsibilities included, but were not limited to, developing accurate polar navigation, surveying and mapping the Arctic, studying weather patterns, testing equipment and personnel in Arctic conditions, and conducting long-range photographic intelligence flights with B-29/F-13A Superfortresses. Unofficially, they were also supposed to monitor potential Soviet military activity in the desolate Arctic. After the Keybird's forced landing, the crew was safely evacuated, leaving the aircraft stranded in the icy Arctic tundra for over 47 years. In June 1994, the Keybird Limited Liability Company, led by aircraft restoration enthusiast under Darrell Greenemeyer, arrived at the crash and found the plane surprisingly well preserved. Determined to restore the Keybird to flight-worthy condition, they brought specialist tools, equipment, and extra parts from the U.S. Armed Services base in Greenland. They planned to make the Keybird operational, take off from the frozen lake, and finish the full restoration at Greenland's Thule Air Force Base before returning it to the United States. But weather delayed their efforts, and the team was forced to leave the site. They returned in May 1995, and by May 21, 1995, the Keybird was finally ready for takeoff. With engines running and turbines spinning, the crew prepared for flight, but discovered a gas leak in the auxiliary power's fuel tank. Despite their efforts to fight the flames, it quickly engulfed the Keybird, causing irreversible damage. The aircraft was beyond saving, and the crew had to cut their losses and abandon the mission. Although it was expected to sink in the lake with the spring thaw, the remains of the B-29 Keybird still sit on the surface of the ice to this day. Would you ever visit Greenland if given the chance? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the video so far. 4. American Landing Craft, Mjóiforor, Iceland. A visitor passing through the pristine Mjóiforor Fjord in Iceland will be impressed by the pristine environment and the region's incredible beauty. On the beach, they might run into an unexpected sight: a rusting American landing craft mechanized LCM dating back to World War II, broken apart by time and the elements. These landing craft were widely used by the US during the Second World War, tasked with the transportation of equipment, vehicles, and supplies. They played pivotal roles in multiple theaters of war, including the invasion of Sicily and the storming of the Normandy beaches on June 6, 1944. A sign fixed to the starboard bow divulges the LCM's deep history. It reveals that the vessel once served as a conduit for moving equipment to a remote US military radar station in the Westfjords region of Iceland. After its military service was finished, the boat was purchased by local fishermen and repurposed to ferry herring cuttings from a processing plant in 1965. Unfortunately, the vessel proved unsuitable as a barge since its engines were removed, leading to its abandonment on the shores of Mjóiforor in 1966. 3. British Hurricane fighter aircraft, Ukraine. In a remarkable discovery, the remains of 8 British Hawker Hurricane planes from World War II were unearthed in a Ukrainian forest. This unexpected find was made during an investigation related to an unexploded bomb from the era. Metal detectors were also used to survey the region around the device, ultimately revealing these long-buried relics of military history. The Hawker Hurricane was a key player during World War II, and these planes were believed to have been sent to the Soviet Union in 1941 by the British. This help was part of a broader military support initiative organized by the Allied forces and funded by the US under the Lend-Lease program. Similar discoveries are rare in Ukraine, and the significance of these Hawker Hurricanes extends beyond their historical value. The plane was celebrated for its robust and easy-to-handle design. It offered excellent stability as a gun platform, making it suitable even for pilots lacking experience. It was also known for its reliability. These characteristics made the Hawker Hurricane an indispensable aircraft during the war. From 1941 to 1944, around 3,000 models of the Hurricanes were sent to aid the Soviet Union in their battle against Nazi Germany. These planes significantly contributed to the war effort, and their presence was instrumental in several key operations. Authentic Hawker Hurricane planes from this period are rare finds, with most of them either destroyed during battle or disassembled for parts. Others met their end at the hands of the Soviet Union after the war, a strategic move to avoid the need for post-war payment. Despite the valuable items like radios being removed from the 8 discovered planes, their retrieval is a historical and cultural milestone. 2. Buffalo Amphibious Vehicle, England. A remarkable piece of World War II history has resurfaced in Lincolnshire, England, as a massive Buffalo amphibious vehicle that was buried underground for 74 years has been successfully restored to working condition. The tank, measuring an impressive 26 feet in length, sank almost 30 feet underground back in 1947. The Buffalo tank's remarkable resurrection started in April 2021, after 3 years of searching and planning. Originally, the Buffalo was used as part of flood defense in the village of Crowland, Lincolnshire, during the March 1947 floods. A temporary dam made of 15 tanks, including the Buffalo, was built to hold back the floodwaters from the River Welland. Unfortunately, the Buffalo and others were swept away and buried underground, creating a hidden relic of wartime history. The restoration project resulted in the tank's cockpit being fully restored, its front armor resprayed, and new tracks fitted. The tank still has an original gearbox that's been repaired, and an engine from the United States will be fitted over the winter. Throughout the restoration process, a few captivating historical artifacts were uncovered, adding layers of significance to this incredible project. Scratched names on the tank's paneling raised questions about whether these markings dated back to World War II or the 1947 floods. Also, a hand-painted symbol of a bull's head from the 79th Armored Division, as well as the words "All OK" were seen. These rescued Buffalo tanks once served as American cargo carriers and were converted for amphibious operations during the war. They were also used by the US Marines in the Pacific and the British Army in Europe during the 1945 Rhine crossing. The Royal Marines even deployed them in Burma, Malaya, and during the 1956 Suez Crisis. They played major roles in river crossings and landing operations. Today, thanks to the unwavering dedication of farmer Daniel Abbott and a team of volunteers, the restored Buffalo in Lincolnshire could soon become Europe's only operational example of this iconic tank. 1. Westland Lynx XZ676 Airbnb. If you're tired of the usual hotel stays and want to explore something truly unique, Airbnb has a surprise in store for you. Imagine spending the night in an ex-military helicopter. This exceptional stay offers a rare opportunity to enjoy a one-of-a-kind getaway. The helicopter is none other than the 1982 Westland Lynx XZ676. Once a multi-purpose twin-engine military helicopter, it's undergone an extraordinary transformation to become one of the most unconventional tiny homes you'll ever see. Located on the outskirts of Blackpool, the aircraft is available for rent on Airbnb for as little as £110 a night. This means you can experience the thrill of staying in a former military aircraft without breaking the budget. Before it retired from active service and transitioned into a lodging option, this Westland Lynx had an illustrious career. It participated in missions for the British Army in various locations, including Kosovo and the Gulf War. Now it sits proudly at Ream Hill Holiday Park, offering a once-in-a-lifetime experience for travelers. The helicopter features a striking setting surrounded by trees and even has a wooden porch attached to its industrial door. The interior has been thoughtfully converted into a cozy lounge and dining area. You'll find everything you need for a comfy stay, from a sofa to a mini fridge to a kitchen sink. Guests can even enjoy watching TV on a monitor strategically placed in front of the cockpit windows, offering a unique front row view. The Lynx's tail section has been transformed into a snug sleeping section that can accommodate 2 adults. If you're traveling with family, the living space can be converted into a second bedroom that can sleep 2 kids. This ex-military helicopter offers a blend of history, adventure, and comfort, making it an ideal getaway for those looking to make memories. Westland Lynx aircraft have a rich history of serving the British Army, Royal Navy, and German Navy, known for their impressive speeds of up to 249 miles per hour. Now, the XZ676 offers a chance for you to make your own aviation history with a stay you won't soon forget. So, if you're up for an adventure and want to sleep in a converted ex-military helicopter, look no further than Airbnb. Your next night away promises to be a truly unforgettable experience that blends history, luxury, and the thrill of sleeping in a real helicopter. Have you ever seen abandoned or restored military vehicles, aircraft, or warships? Let us know all about it down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.